Hi 4G students, welcome to the last video of the week. Today guys, today is May 1st, 2020 and we are ready to close the week with social studies. So today's topic is WW2. Yes, I'm talking about World War II. And before I start with this lesson, let me show you some of the images that we saw in the classroom. I know you remember some of these pictures. Do you remember? Yes, this lesson was from November when I presented to you the life of Soldier Johnson. Do you remember that? Well, today we can say that it's a continuation of that lesson because today we are going to be talking about how the United States got involved in the war and how Texas helped the United States to win the war. Okay, guys, what can I say about this war? Okay, so now you know that World War One was so destructive. Well, this war, World War II, was even worse than the first one. There was more technology. The airplanes were faster. The weapons were bigger, and sadly, scientists discovered or invented the atomic bomb, and the atomic bomb was used for the first time in World War II. And I'm gonna teach you about that in a little bit. But first, let me give you an introduction about how this war started and who was in the war and all of that. Okay, so World War II. Okay, it began in the year of 1939 and ended in the year of 1945. So we are talking here in the time of the Great Depression. The Great Depression, now you know that it was a hard time for the United States. A lot of people were living on the streets. People were eating from food from trash cans, and the country was just getting better in 1939. And then here you go. You have another war, another huge war in Europe. And let me tell you that the war helped a little bit talking about economy, but it's never good to have a war. Wars are never good. Okay, but why? Why did the war needed to happen? Why did the war happen? Okay, so do you remember that Germany lost in World War One? Okay, so now we can say that at this time in history, they wanted to take revenge. And here on the left, I have some of the causes that provoked World War II. So countries like Japan, Italy, and Germany, in some way, they wanted to take revenge for everything that happened in the first war. They wanted to take revenge, and there were some documents that supposedly were made to provide peace in the world, like the Treaty of Versailles, the League of Nations, the policy of appeasement. All of those documents were made after World War One. The intention of those documents was to provide peace to the world, and then they told Germany, you need to pay back for everything that happened in World War One, and you are not allowed to provoke a war again. But you know what? Now at that time they had another leader. It was Hitler, and Hitler and the other leaders from the other countries, such as Mussolini from Italy, they wanted to take revenge. And they said, whatever, I don't care what those documents say. I'm gonna make my country more powerful. If I have to do an invasion, I'm gonna do it. I don't care if the United States don't like it. I don't care if England doesn't like it. I don't care what they say. I'm gonna do my thing. and I'm pretty much destroy what I have to destroy in order to gain power. Okay, so a lot of conflicts were happening in the 1930s, and still countries like England, the United States, France, they didn't want to start a war with Germany again. But the tension again was increasing and increasing. That in 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, the USSR, uh, which is now known as Russia, declared war to Germany, and at this time the war started, and little by little countries started to get involved, like Japan and the United States and Brazil. And you can see here the map that a lot of countries were involved: Australia, China, Brazil, Canada, and a lot of countries in Europe. So the way they did it, they kind of did it like on the first one. They created teams. Do you remember the alliances? Okay, now in World War II, there were two teams, but the teams changed a little bit. Now the first team was called the Axis Power. In the Axis Power were the ones in yellow. So it was Romania, Italy, Germany, um, and and Japan. Those were the main ones for the Axis power. On the other side were the Allied powers, the ones in green. So countries like Belgium, France, the USSR, China, the United States were together fighting against the Axis power. So here you go again. You have two teams, a lot of countries involved in the war, the Axis power against the Allied powers. Keep in mind that the United States was with the Allied powers, okay? Okay, so that was the beginning of the war. So now let's go ahead and read more about how Texas and how the United States needed to work a little bit harder to make it through this difficult time. Okay, the Great Depression characterized or set apart the 1930s, but it was World War II that defined the 1940s. World War II lasted from 1939 to 1945 and ended in a victory for our nation and its allies. While war of any time is a sad turn of events, World War II gave Texans and most Americans a renewed purpose. As Texans at home worked hard to help the war effort in many different ways, the economy began to bounce back from the difficult times of the previous decade. Okay, so propaganda. Propaganda are the posters that were made during the war. So here we just have two posters. But here, what I really want to mention is that when soldiers needed to go to war, remember that the war was fought in the Pacific and in Europe, they left the nation and they left a lot of positions, right? So here we have our powerful women doing the work that men used to do. So here I want to mention that we were able to make it through the last years of the Great Depression thanks to women, because women, since the men left to Europe to fight, the women stay here in the United States, and they were the ones taking care of the production of goods and services, and they helped to build a lot of things like rifles, canned food, uh, clothing, you name it, a lot of things. So women were the ones that helped our country to keep going. So women, thumbs up to women because they did an amazing job. And I know you have seen this before, the one that says we can do it, and that represents that women were showing to men that they had also the power to make great things, and they were able to show that during World War II. Even though they didn't go to war, no, they didn't. For the most part, were men, but they were the ones that stayed in the United States, producing goods and services for the entire nation. Next. Okay, how did the United States get involved in the war? That's the next uh, paragraph. So America joined the Allied forces on December 8th, 1941, one day after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The majority of Texans strongly supported President Franklin D. Roosevelt's decision to join with Britain, France, China, and the Soviet Union in their attempts to stop the opposing Axis forces. Remember on the Axis forces, which were the enemies, were Japan, Germany, and Italy, from invading and taking over the countries. With about 750,000 Texans in the military, the Lone Star State had more of its citizens in the armed forces than any other state in the nation. Texans proved to be very brave on the battlefront. In fact, 33 Texans won the nation's highest military award, the Congressional Medal of Honor. Among the recipients were Clero Rodriguez of San Antonio, whose bravery saved many lives in the Philippines, and Audie Murphy of Farmersville, who earned more military awards than any other US soldier in the war. Okay, so here, guys, here I have two uh, pictures that will give you a better explanation of this paragraph. Okay, so how and why did the United States get involved in the war? Okay, so we know that the war started in 1939, but the United States got involved until 1941. Why did they wait 2 years? Okay, at first, Roosevelt, who was the president of the United States, didn't want to get involved. He said, you know what, US citizens, we had enough with the first war. It was so destructive. We had a lot of casualties that we don't want to go to war again. Not anymore. I'm just gonna let them fight on their own. He was talking about Great Britain, France, and China. But on December 7th, 1941, in Hawaii, when everyone was in peace, remember that Hawaii is a state of the United States. In that morning, some Japanese airplanes attacked Pearl Harbor, which is a military base from the US. And that event changed the perspective of Roosevelt. The next day, on December 8th, he said, I didn't want to do this, but if the Japanese are gonna be acting like that, we need to respond. So we are going to support the Allied powers. We are going to be in the war. So the United States joined the war. And the United States stayed in Europe and in the Pacific for 4 years. And on the other picture where it says D-Day, do you remember Soldier Johnson on D-Day? Okay, D-Day was the greatest invasion in history. The United States was part of this. So the mission here was to, excuse me, the mission here was to kind of surround Germany. So they didn't have any option, that they needed to make this invasion through the ocean. And it was a really tough day, a lot of casualties, but at the end, the United States was able to win and beat Germany during the war, and that is known as D-Day, and that happened on June 6, 1944. If something you need to know about World War II is this day, D-Day, the greatest invasion in U.S. Not only in U.S. history, but the greatest invasion from any war in history. Okay, the last paragraph. On the home front, Texans worked very hard to aid the war efforts as well. With so many men at war, women went to work in factories. I told you, women were the ones taking jobs that men had traditionally held. Men and women working in the Texas oil industry provided more than half of all the oil used for fuel in the war, and Texas steel workers manufactured tons of steel later used to build warplanes and battleships. The high demand for products such as these created thousands of new jobs in Texas, and as a result, the economy improved dramatically. When the war ended in 1945 and Texas soldiers were welcome home, they found their state much better off than it had been when they left for the war. So Texas, once again, the big states of the United States, was able to show that we are not only big, but we are really helpful. During World War II, Texas provided, look at this, Texas provided more than half of all the oil used for fuel during the war. Remember that we have a lot of oil in Texas, right? So this was the time to provide all the oil for the war, and we did more things than that. We once again, Texas provided training camps. Texas produced goods and services for soldiers, and Texas provided oil for the soldiers and for the war. So Texas, once again, was able to show that we are a great state in the United States. And now I know you are asking yourselves, how did the war come to an end? Okay, here comes the sad part of World War II. Especially, I don't like to talk too much about this part, but I do it because you need to know it. Okay, so do you remember D-Day? Do you remember this? Okay, so D-Day was a great success because they were able to defeat Nazi Germany. But on the Pacific, they were still fighting against Japan. Japan didn't want to surrender. Japan continued fighting and fighting and fighting. And the United States said, well, I think the war is not going to stop. We continue fighting and Japan just wants to continue doing this. And Roosevelt said, oh, I don't want to keep this war going, because if we do it, it's gonna provoke more casualties, right? And I don't want to see more soldiers dying in the Pacific. So the United States decided to drop 2 atomic bombs on Japan. And those 2 atomic bombs were so destructive that they destroyed the 2 cities completely. And those 2 cities were Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And after they dropped those 2 bombs, Japan gave up, and that was the end of World War II in 1945. Yes, I know it's sad. I think it was not a good decision from the United States, but that's how they did it. And lessons that we can learn from this war and from all the wars, guys, wars are never good. Wars do not solve any problems. Actually, they bring more problems. And you're gonna see that after World War II, we are gonna have more wars. And this is like a repeating process. Wars are never good. Wars never solve any problems. And they just create a lot of destruction, sadness, negativity. And no, guys, that's not good. Okay, so that was World War II. Guys, if you have any questions, please let me know. And today is Friday, and we still have a video conference with Ms. Rojas at 1 p.m. So if you want to share with her your comments about World War II, do it with her at 1 p.m. So guys, thank you, and see you on Monday. We still need to be here 3 more weeks. We still need to do more lessons. And one thing before I leave, please guys, complete all the assignments. If you didn't do the assignment for the Great Depression, do it right now. If you didn't do the assignment from yesterday, I'm talking about fractions in Spanish, do it right now. And please do the one for today. Okay, thank you guys. It was a pleasure to do this video. I am your teacher, Mr. Gonzalez. Thank you. See you next time.